Hi, I'm Allie Danziger. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Ampersand, a careerness platform for Gen Z. And I'm excited to kick off this conversation about how businesses of all shapes and sizes can take advantage of Gen Z talent and the best ways to transition your organization for that. So I will transition to my good friend, Carrie Colbert, and let her moderate this discussion for us. Take it away, Carrie.
Great. Thanks, Allie. I'm so glad to be visiting with you all today. We've got a stellar lineup here for you. I'll introduce myself first, and then we'll go around and I'll call on each of you in kind of the order that you're showing up on my screen. So yeah, my name is Carrie Colbert. I spent about 20 years in oil and gas, but now run a venture capital fund along with my partners, Mark Latham and Alyssa Arnold, who may be on this call. Anyway, we invest in female-founded businesses, primarily built for other women. And so we work with a lot of Gen Z talent, whether are the founders themselves or within our portfolio companies. So excited to hear, all the thoughts on this topic. Next, let's go. Shaun, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Shaun Six. I'm located here in Houston. I work for a company called RedEye. We do cloud-based data management for engineering firms, basically infrastructure, mobile design. My first internship, actually, my first experience with internship was about 8 months into my first corporate gig. I was asked to participate in a rotation program. And it was the best thing that I did for my career and for my life, I'd say. I got to meet a lot of interesting people, learn a lot. And I found my first mentor who helped me. She mentored me to become a project management professional, which I still hold that certification today.
Great. And Monica, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Monica De La Rosa. I work for Harris County Precinct 1, Commissioner Rodney Ellis. I'm the Deputy Director of Programs, and my focus is on internships and our nonprofit arm called the Street Olympics. We run a couple of different internship programs, but my first internship program I was a poli-sci undergrad. So I did a internship with the Harris County Democratic Party, and it was fun and awesome, but it was in the late 90s. I got to meet President Clinton a couple times and drive at the presidential motorcade. So it was pretty fun.
Okay. Allie, anything else you want to say about yourself?
Yeah, sure. My professional background, I previously started and ran a marketing agency 12 years ago. In that agency, I hired about 200 entry-level professionals, learned a lot of lessons of the skills gap in that education to employment transition. And so from that, I created Ampersand about a year ago, but really at scale, I'd say 6 months ago, where we coach and train young professionals for everything they need to know in their first internship. And then we set them up with a paid guaranteed internship. So it's a great marketplace for young professionals as well as businesses. And my first internship was at one of my parents' friends' hedge funds. And it had nothing to do with anything I wanted to do when I grew up, but it was a great entry-level experience for me into the working world. But seeing that and recognizing that that's a really unique experience to have a parent who has a friend who owns a company who can get you an internship is part of what inspired me to create this and really democratize that first internship for young professionals who don't have those same types of natural connections.
Great. And what about you, Joe?
Yeah, so Joe Alapat, CEO and co-founder of Liongard. We're a growing company here in Houston. We're all about unleashing 10X, which I can get into later. And we feel strongly that when it comes to managing technology, using technology, things have gotten really complicated lately. When you think about everything from all of the things we're using during the pandemic to make work still happen, to all of the cybersecurity exposures that we all face, what we're about is making visibility possible across this very complicated stack. So that all the magic can happen, so people can get to 10X. And my own personal experience around internships, my first one was at MD Anderson, and just like Allie, I was blessed having a parent give me an intro that allowed me to go to MD Anderson and do an internship where the doctors told me that I was crazy, that I was considering medicine, and that I should go into technology. And I'm thankful that they were able to give me that advice. And so internships are really meaningful to me. We're actually working with Ampersand, had our first intern this summer, like awesome. It was an amazing success. Really enjoy the work that we've done and looking forward to doing more there.
Great. And Lola, our resident Gen Z expert, give us some background on yourself.
Yes, thank you, Carrie. So my name is Lola McAllister. I am a member of Gen Z. So I am a student. I'm starting my second year of college this fall, and I'm the co-founder of a nonprofit organization called Project Matriarchs. And so my childhood best friend and I started this during the pandemic. Our main focus is mobilizing Gen Z in support of working caregivers and in pursuit of a progressive care policy agenda in the US, both corporate and public policy. We're starting in the private sector. That's a bit about Project Matriarchs and a bit about my first internship, somewhat random, but again, it was a personal connection through my parents. So it kind of demonstrates the privilege there that it can sometimes take to access internships. It was with a drone company, which has nothing to do with my interest except that they were delivering medical materials. And so I did everything from like helping orchestrate their office move to use case research and stuff like that. And in terms of Project Matriarchs, we actually are winding down our summer internship program. So we had about 30 Gen Z interns over the summer doing work with our advocacy branch. So I'm definitely here to attest to the power of Gen Z interns.
Awesome. Well, I failed to tell you about my first internship, and I'll do that briefly. I did not have any parental connections, but I was studying engineering, and my first internship when I was only, 18 or 19 years old was for an oil and gas company. And my mentor that summer is still a dear friend and mentor and advisor. So just a testament to how, life-changing and life-shaping those internships can be. So before we jump into, kind of the questions I'll pose to all of you, why don't we start with you, Lola? I mean, you are the Gen Z person, so let's go straight to the source. Most of us have aged out of that expertise. So tell us, what are you and your cohorts looking for? What makes this company stand out for driven professionals like yourself, and really what motivates you to go to work for a company?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think so much research shows that our generation increasingly is making decisions in accordance with our values, and whether that's around consumption or employment or anything along those lines. And I think obviously it's important to acknowledge that it takes a certain level of privilege and security to be able to make employment decisions in accordance with your values. That's like a privilege that I have. And so I think many folks are going to be looking for companies that align with their values all along, the spectrum of values. And what I am particularly focused on is engaging, and what Pilar and I are working on is engaging our generation in thought around how we want our companies to think about us and value us as caregivers, and how we want to be empowered as caregivers moving forward. I think this is under discussed so far within our generation, but we are seeing kind of a growing moment right now, because the pandemic obviously has revealed the insufficiencies in corporate and public policy when it comes to supporting caregivers. And our caregiving kind of identities are obviously central to many of our lives and really defining the quality of our lives. And so I think getting our generation to focus on how we want those relationships and dynamics to manifest in our lives, and how we want those to play into the way we see ourselves professionally as well, is something we're really focused on. And so we really do think that increasingly our generation will be looking for companies that empowers and values us both as employees and as humans with caregiving responsibilities and duties to our families and loved ones.
That's very interesting to hear that, Lola. We see that a lot from a venture capital perspective in the companies we invest in on the consumer side. But in terms of making hiring decisions, that's an important point as well. Thank you for sharing that. Now to the rest of you, how do you see working with Gen Z to be different than, say, working with millennials or any other generation? What pivots have you made to kind of accommodate these changing priorities of this new generation? Feel free to jump in if you've got something.
I can start. I really see Gen Z as being digitally aware, socially aware. They were born into a world, which I think maybe just from a definition standpoint, Gen Z in my mind is like teenagers to like about 25-year-olds at this point. Is that fair? Late teenagers, 18 to 24. And so with that in mind, what I've observed is that they do things that are just different and a leap ahead, where there's a tendency in terms of, let's say, work from anywhere, what's happened with the pandemic. They're very comfortable with working from random locations, pulling up Zoom and just doing things asynchronously. And it's just natural for them, where for a lot of us from prior generations, it's taken a shift. It's like, wait, I don't know. Should I be commuting into an office? And that feels normal. And this whole work from anywhere thing is abnormal. That's what I've seen personally. So I've seen a level of flexibility to these recent events, which they've been very adept at. And so that's lent themselves well towards the new work environment, I think.
Absolutely. We see the employee turnover is at an all-time high. So I think it's incumbent upon us in leadership roles to adjust to that. Any other comments on how you and your companies have adjusted?
I think,
Monica,
sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Monica.
I'm in public service. And so as most of you know, in public service, technology runs like 10 years behind. Mm-hmm. So when we engage Gen Z interns, they're frustrated with us, but they are also teaching us a lot more about how to be efficient. And it's really valuable to us because it's helpful. And, we make an argument to leadership that this is really overall, they are the future. They know what they want. They know the best way for us to be efficient as for a constituency that pays taxes. So it's very rewarding for us to have that input. It's also frustrating for a lot of people too, because they're so much faster and quicker and more adaptable to things.
I would second that there's a digital first expectation that was I think for my, I'm in that cusp right in between, the bridge between I guess the millennials and whatever we call the Gen X, I guess. But so I don't fit into anyone, but I kind of align better with the Gen Zs is what I found is I think Lola made a good point earlier in her introduction was they vote with their activity and their dollars and their time, and they will jump in and take ownership and support things they believe in. And so for me, it aligns nicely and giving them ownership. And Allie and I were talking about this the other day. The difference in approach is you can set the why and the framework for them, and then talk to them and work with them on the how. And a lot of times they'll actually come up with ideas that are way better than any how or playbook that I had come up with. But in previously with interns, the playbook was essential. I had to give it to them and walk them through, click here, go here, A, B, C, D. But that's because they weren't digital first, and Gen Z is digital first. And so they're going to actually push back and say why. And that should be applauded and accepted and encouraged. I think that would be the biggest difference for me.
Yeah. And I'll piggyback off of that. I think while that transition is coming from the digital first mentality, Gen Z is also more diverse than any other generation that has ever existed. And so as those new diverse backgrounds and mindsets come into the workplace, I think that is what gives companies the opportunity to have diverse thought and ideas and things you didn't necessarily know before. Also, most of us said that our internships came from people we know or connections we had. If we break that barrier, then that also helps to increase the diversity that we're allowing into our corporations. But the transition that really has to happen that I've had to work on in the past, 15 years of leadership is a lot like allowing that, right? Like getting your leadership team and getting your company comfortable with getting the interns or the entry-level hires into the meeting and into the room, and making it not just so that they can come up with the ideas and like bring it to someone on Slack, but that they feel really, really comfortable bringing up new ideas, recognizing problems or trends that they see as fresh people into your company versus like the same ideas that have always circulated. So it does take work to actively, not just from the top, but like from the top to encourage the whole company to allow that those unique and fresh perspectives to be accepted.
Great. On that note, Allie, you want to touch a little bit on what Ampersand is, what your mission is, and why it's so important to you, and why it's so important to all of us right now?
Yeah, I mean, I see so many companies focusing on wanting to recruit diverse talent. It's buzzy. They hire a chief diversity officer and they say, "Great, check the box. We're focused on D&I," but there's not a lot going into that, and so that I've seen. And so by recruiting from in a more diverse talent pool at the internship level, it's a longer term talent strategy, but it can really help to increase diverse talent, diverse thought from driven individuals into the company. And we give them the training and coaching from day one so that they not only are on par with maybe the talent that you're used to recruiting, but above that as well, so that Ampersand professionals come in better trained and more likely to excel in their internships and then get hired, promoted, et cetera. So, I mean, that's my mission, is that first internship. I maybe have some privilege guilt over how easy that first internship was for me, that then gave me the opportunity to then start my first business at 24 and, do awesome things in my career. And so I realize how important that first internship is, how important that first part of your career is, and want to be able to really offer those types of opportunities to underrepresented communities across the country and world.
That's awesome. Joe, I did want to come back to something you mentioned at the beginning. What does this Find Your 10X mean, and how have you applied that to grow your team so very quickly?
Yeah, I think, just starting with a story, just running into Allie at this office space we were at. And it's funny, she pitched me on Ampersand, and I'm like, I'm in, sign me up, because I'm so interested. I have so many cousins and family members who are younger, who have kind of coached through the process and trying to encourage them to do internships. So it's great to see what Ampersand is doing. And, when we think about finding your 10X, if anyone kind of sees some of the content, we talk about, Liongard's why is unleashing 10X for everyone, anywhere, anytime. And that's important. And what do we mean by 10X? It means getting into your flow state, doing the things that you were you were naturally, your DNA designs you to be amazing at these things, to achieve light bulb moments. So it's not so much productivity improvements, it's making these leaps forward. And in my mind, diverse thought process leads to innovation, right? It naturally comes with unconventional thought process. So these are the things that we think about every day at Liongard. And when we're hiring, we all know that, hiring strong tech talent or security talent is very difficult. What I've started to see is, and we've been successful in this, is hiring unconventionally results in amazing outcomes. For example, we hire teachers, and those teachers don't come from this strong technology background or traditional background that you'd normally see in a company like ours, but it's been really magical what they've been able to do. And what our customers tell us is that they've never seen a company behave the way we do with our customers, because we're teaching first. And it is our fifth core value, is to teach and lead. And that's something that's just part of our DNA. And so when we think about 10X, I think about positioning people in a position for success. So much like this internship concept, it's a journey, right? It's like, how do you discover what you would enjoy doing, and yet is also naturally something you can do really well? It's a journey that needs as much help as you can. And so one of those things is getting people the ability to early on get experience and observe things like I did, being in a hospital setting, to realize, I don't think being a doctor is my thing. It's just not. And I was also pursuing technology at the same time. I was lucky. I could have potentially wasted 10 years of my life coming to that realization, or been in a profession that it wasn't my 10X. And, shame on me for not discovering that. But you know what? Great that folks like Allie are putting internships into play that allow this to happen. And I think, kind of a final note, I think what Lola said around core values is so important. What we're finding is projecting out the core values when you're interviewing and talking to folks is so important. What is your company about? Who do you, identify with? And when you can do that, it really is refreshing to candidates to then go, oh, okay, that's not for me, or, oh my God, I love that. They can lean in. And so if you're like a a current person like Shaun, who's trying to be a Gen Zer, I try to be current. That's something I try to keep up with my daughter's K-pop. I don't know if you're familiar with Korean pop, like all the latest trending going on there. And I try to track with it just because I'm trying to understand where is this new generation headed, because they're teaching us where the market is headed.
Great input, Joe. Thank you for that. And Shaun, I know you hire from a diverse geographic, pool as well, both in the U.S. and Australia. Are you seeing any differences geographically, or is it more commonality across the generational divide?
Yeah, that's a good question. It is definitely different, and I think so our company's Australia, New Zealand, and North America. My previous company was UK, Canada, and Latin America, in addition to North America. So I've got a bit of a mix there as far as hiring people. And I would say in Australia, where we're heading is where they already are in a lot of ways. So what we call exceptions here, we call work from home an exception until COVID. I don't know that I ever heard a North America company talk about mental health days or even inquiring about your mental health. In fact, it would be mocked or laughed at by most of the companies I worked at here in North America. But that is by design. You get mental health days. There's no justification or requirement to submit a mental health day. You just say, hey, I'm taking a mental health day. So that's the expectations. What the exception here is expectation in Australia in a lot of ways. But I think now after COVID, we're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a lot of people talk about their mental health, the ability, and the Gen Z group has pushed us too. Because some of those expectations are their expectations as well. Sometimes, hey, I don't want to work at the office. I want to work from a cafe today, or I want to be a little more social. And that is not an option sometimes with them. They're absolutely requiring it. So it's forcing us to change how we manage in North America.
Yeah, indeed. I think some of these changes are going to be forced upon us for good in a lot of cases. So, Monica, I know that you've run an extraordinary number of interns for your program, like in the hundreds, right? And so what are some of those trends that you're noticing lately?
Well, we're in a unique place where we have three programs. The Lee internship program was founded by Commissioner Lee when he was, the late Commissioner Lee when he was in office, and it engages graduating seniors and undergraduate students. And because a lot of his focus was always on underserved communities, we do outreach to high schools that are typically underserved, and we work with a lot of their counselors just to find people that they feel have talent that may not be the A or B student. And so we try to cultivate them. And so they have a talent, or they have an asset that could be useful, that just needs to kind of be honed on. So then the other program that I work with is Commissioner Ellis. When he was in the Senate, he started the Texas Legislative Internship Program. And that focuses more on graduate level students, law students, first and second year law students. So I kind of have a mix of both that millennial and Gen Z, and so it's interesting. I think one of the things, and I think Shaun said it earlier, was this whole idea of work-life balance, where we, like my generation, has just been like work. Young people are just like, what's your work-life balance? You work a lot. Why are you sending me emails at midnight? And it's something that I never thought twice about. And I think with the pandemic and us all having to really work from home, that even my kid, he's a Gen Z, he like adapted immediately. And I was just, it's something that they can bring a philosophy to us that I think would actually make us so much more productive, that we have been pushing against. But actually, that's what we need in order to be productive. I mean, we've just traditionally just been so, even local government has been changing so much. We've gotten so many like new people, newly elected, younger, diverse people that are just bringing different perspectives. So it's not like this old white man run type thing anymore, the way government has traditionally been. And so it's been very helpful for us overall. You do have, your naysayers who are just like adamantly against changing, but there's more of them than there are us now. So they're paving the way.
Indeed. Well, on that subject, what projects have you found that it's been helpful to assign to your interns? So, or the Gen Z talent pool, what projects have you delegated successfully as we think about, how to split the workload up? Joe, do you have something? Joe or Allie, either one.
Yeah, happy to share. I think we have to think of it as a two-way road. One is, what are you getting in terms of benefit? What is the intern learning during that process? I think of it in terms of, is this a notch or a milestone or a story that intern can actually share in their career progression? And, I look to try to make it a point that there's something definitive. And at the same time, when we think, to answer your question specifically, how do we pick it? I personally choose asynchronous projects. And what do I mean by that? There is no specific deadline that's going to stress this individual out. That's, okay, by next week, you need to do this. And then by following week, you got to do this. Because, oh my God, that's tough to put someone in the boiler room that quickly. Better to have some of these, maybe these multi-week projects that you can never get to. They're like, man, it would be amazing if we could actually make progress on that thing. And they can go off, do the research, do things, check in with you, and make that progress. So that's what I usually like to choose, is asynchronous, and also milestone type projects that actually have something that they can share results by the end of the internship. And if we can, do a presentation. So I'm still trying to work on getting our internship that we're going to probably seek to do a presentation where he can present the results of some of the research he's done. So lots of good experiences there, hopefully.
Great. What about you, Allie?
I was actually going to almost say exactly the same thing. So way to go, Joe. But what we've found, with the 200 or so internships that we've placed across different businesses, is that thing that's always been on your to-do list that one day I'd love to get to, but I just don't have time or resources, and I don't want to pull so-and-so who's on this project off to work on this. Then my background is in public relations. That's what my first career was in. And I always trained people by saying, your job is not necessarily to tell your client's message, but to understand what your audience, media person, what they're trying to do. They're trying to make themselves look good to their editor. Like that, at the end of the day, when you're trying to place a story, is the number one thing you need to be thinking about. So it's the same thing with an internship a lot of times. Like, this person is in this internship to try to get a job down the road. So how can you align expectations and align both of your goals so that they're in it for themselves, like what they want to get out of it? They want something awesome in their portfolio that they can take into their next interview and get their dream job. So if you can come up with a project that aligns with what they're looking for, that helps your business, that's how the magic of an internship can really happen. It can be challenging to come up with what that type of project would be. And Ampersand, we have all the templates to help you have those conversations. But, I'd say, like, for us, one project that we just had with one of our interns that was super helpful was this, like, oh, wouldn't it be great if we had this whole awesome onboarding experience for our business partners? Nothing that I wanted to have our product team actively, working on, but we had an intern who really, really wanted to build a website as part of his portfolio. And we knew that he wasn't working on any of that kind of projects because he just didn't have the type of experience for what we would really need on something like that. But I gave him this project on a Friday. I was like, hey, if you by chance would have time to work on this, I did a screen share of a video demo for like 5 minutes of exactly how to do everything, what we were looking for, had all the copy that he could do. And by Monday at noon, he did it because he was so excited about it and aligned with what he wanted to get out of the internship. So again, it was nothing that we would have done otherwise. And it was such a win-win for both parties.
Allie, that's getting to the 10X, right? It's alignment, right? You're finding something that they would enjoy doing, something they want to do, and suddenly you see something special.
And it's kind of doing it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool.
I agree. I think on the 10X thing, there's a strength-based leadership. I don't know if you've ever looked into that, but
one of my favorites.
I'm a huge fan. And so that's one of the first things I do with all my interns and new employees is buy the book, give them the test. And, there's no perfect one size fits all for anybody, but whatever works to help them find, I always say, first know thyself, that philosophy. And then when they come in, they may never have taken that. And it's kind of a shame that people will spend 4 to 6, maybe 8 years in college and never have an assessment where they're learning about themselves and what fills their energy bucket at the end of the day. And my goal for everyone that I have the opportunity to work with is I want them to walk away feeling energized more than they walk away feeling depleted. So some of it is finding that out with them, and we get a list of options when they come in of, here are things you can work with and that you can do. And there are always those grunt things that are nice to have an intern to jump in the weeds and get done for you while they're here. But on the flip side, putting them in touch with the CMO, or we had a marketing intern, so that's what's on the top of my head, is bringing in somebody like that they can get experience at the C level that they might not get anywhere else, but at a startup we're small enough that we can do that. And but then also getting them to provide feedback and not waiting till the end of their internship, but having them every 2 weeks present to the team what they learned, what they like, what's going well, what's not going well. That way it's kind of an agile internship, as opposed to, here's your job, here's your book, go run with it. Good.
Shaun touched on something just then that's been on my mind. I'm going to go a little off script, Allie, and ask Lola this question because it's a dissonance or disconnect that we've experienced. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So I get that Gen Z is very like values driven and choosing where they go to work and you know, kind of often wants to understand the why and work on kind of big picture things. But sometimes there's just, you know, some menial tasks that just has to get done. So how do you, I think there's a perception is sometimes that you're not necessarily willing to do some of those menial things, that you want to always be kind of on these big picture tasks. How can you help me resolve that? Or how would you suggest that we deal with that? You know, that yucky work that kind of has to get done versus, you know, the mix of big picture driven sort of work.
I mean, that's such a great question. And I think just framing it like that work is critical to the larger scale work. And I think that I know all of my friends who have had internships, myself, I've done my fair share of that work. And that's the vast majority of the work I'm doing when I get an internship. There might be an additional kind of passion project. For example, like one of the more meaningful internships I had, the CEO said, okay, like work on this problem that we're having and see what you can find out about it. And in all your free time between the tasks you're doing to help do the business operation side of things. So, you know, like making sure the office is clean, breaking down the cardboard, making sure the trash gets picked up, all of that kind of work that, you know, it's not the most fun, but it has to get done. And I'm an intern, so I'm going to do it. I do get to work on that side project. That's like really creative problem solving of who should I talk to find the answer to this question? What kind of research, what format should I present my findings into the CEO when I'm done, that sort of thing. So I think it's kind of like our generation, like we're not gonna skip those tasks in our internships, and we can't like disillusion ourselves in that way and think that because we think differently than maybe generations prior that we won't have to do the same kind of menial tasks that come with like an entry level job or position, because that's the reality. That's how things work. So I think just kind of framing that as like critical to the larger scale operations of your company, of your organization. And then also giving folks, like making sure that's not the entirety of their experience by giving them an additional project or kind of question to explore.
That's really great input. I appreciate you sharing all that, Lola. Now, in an effort to kind of bring it back to a conclusion, and then we can take some questions if there are some. Final question for all of you. What is your one piece of advice that you would give to any business considering hiring an intern or hiring a Gen Z employee? Who wants to go first?
I can go.
Go for it.
Be prepared to learn as much as teach. It's a two-way road, and there's a lot you can learn. And it's awesome if you can get a Gen Z person to come into the office. You're just going to hear a different perspective. They're going to say things. Really listen carefully. There's going to be some light bulb moment where they say something and you're like, what? That's kind of interesting. I never thought of it that way. If you're hearing that in your head, I never thought of it that way, write it down, because those kinds of perspective, that's where innovation begins. It comes from that different perspective, coming at something from a different angle. And I cannot say it enough. That's what's helped Liongard to be successful, is bringing people from different backgrounds to deliver innovation.
I love that. Shaun, what's your one piece of advice?
I would say have more frequent and less formal feedback sessions. You'll get a lot more honesty, a lot more transparency, and people don't feel like guarded whenever there's a form that you're filling in.
Good. And Monica, what about you?
I think it's important for all of us, even though they are much younger than us. They're adults. And so treating them as such is really, really important. It's important to them. And yes, they are young, but we were there once and we wanted to be treated like an adult. And so I think that's really important it's kind of like a mutual respect. When you do that, I think you get more out of people.
Absolutely. Allie?
This is one that's not so much for Gen Z, although I think it's really important. And that's being really, I think it's really important when you're doing a hybrid work environment. And that's taking the time to teach and train. If they're not next to you, if they're not like getting the experience of, hey, just pop over and see what's happening on my laptop, it takes another minute to like take the conversation off Slack, get on Zoom, screen share something, give them background as to Lola's point, like, okay, you might just be doing this very basic task, but of course it always ties up to a larger initiative with the business. Just take the minute to explain that. And I think that can get, it can take away a lot of frustrations. It can get greater buy-in to Lola's point, but also just like lots of back and forth can happen in a remote environment. And that screen share, that video recording, a little bit more explanation can be really helpful. And also being very clear on deadlines. To say, get this to me as soon as possible, it like should be stricken from the English language. But, we need this by Thursday at noon. Maybe we can check, or let's check in Wednesday at 4:00 before the end of the day, see your progress on it, and make sure I can address any questions. We also train our professionals, if you're not going to meet the deadline, how to communicate that, but it's a two-way street from the managers too, of how to be really clear of what your expectations are.
Great. And Lola, we'll close with you on this. What is your one piece of advice?
Okay, great. So I think my one piece of advice would be give your Gen Z interns opportunities to do problem solving work. I think that's where we excel and like where we can add the most value to places we're at, even if temporarily. And then also use it as an opportunity to learn what Gen Z is looking for in a future workplace, how they want their employers and coworkers to treat them and act. So it's also a really valuable kind of learning experience for the company.
Awesome. And with that, we can open it up to questions. I haven't seen any come in the Q&A box yet, but if you've got any, type in the Q&A or the chat box, either one, we'd be glad to take those. And in the meantime, I'll turn it over to the panelists. Anything else that you've been wanting to add to the discussion?
It'd be interesting to know what generation everybody's from. Would that be fair to ask in the chat?
You bet. Yeah.
Like we could type it into, because I'm a Gen X, so.
I'm technically a millennial, but I'm at that same cusp that Shaun's at, and I've never really identified with a lot of the like millennial stereotypes. My sister is 4 years younger than me, and we grew up in the same house, and it's always been very interesting to me to like see these huge differences, because she had email and a cell phone and just like different things. So I had a phone in my room, like a landline, not even a portable phone, And so just those it's so weird in my mind that 4 years was able to make such a difference with the different technologies. But the way that we communicate professionally and personally is really different.
No, it's so true. Like, it's funny, like we label the generations, and it's common to say, oh, I'm so frustrated with this new generation. And the funny part is that these generations are a product of their environment. And the environment was created by you if you happen to be somebody in charge, like a parent. So, it's funny. It's just a mirror image. It's a reflection of how you're parenting. It's a reflection of how you're teaching. It's a reflection of how you're leading. And so it's funny to think of it that way.
Well, I also
Lola, we have a question. Yeah. No, that's okay. Lola, we have a question for you. What do you wish employers knew about your generation? Like, is there a stereotype you wish that people would just forget?
That's a super good question. I think there are a number of stereotypes, most of which are based on some level of truth. So I will acknowledge that. But I think the stereotype about like entitlement to like better, like an elevation of the status quo that generations before us didn't have. And I feel like that's mostly a reflection of the kind of like, our generation endured this, so can yours kind of mentality, rather than Gen Z feeling actually entitled to an improvement upon the status quo. And so that's like a lot of, I think, like Gen Z brings a perspective where we're like thinking outside of the dominant discourse. And so we can kind of challenge structures and frameworks. And that's improving, you know, corporate policy, public policy to be more supportive of, like in our case, we're thinking about working caregivers. That benefits everybody. It's not just for Gen Z. So it's not really an entitlement to improvement. It's more kind of like a different perspective we bring and a motivation to change the status quo. So that's one thing I would push back against. That kind of bothers me when people respond to Gen Z activism saying you're so entitled. It's like, well, we're organizing and activating and doing the legwork to make actual change. If that's entitlement, I don't know what to say. So that's one thing I would push back against.
I want to just say, I think something you said is really, really important, which is, because we endured things, we think you have a sense of entitlement. Shame on us for enduring lots of things. You know, that's what makes you all so valuable and powerful, that you have the wherewithal to not endure things that some of us felt were just what we were supposed to do.
Yeah, there's a tendency for Gen Z to provide a little bit more radical candor. I've also seen that with millennials, where I call it like they'd be willing to punch. They're sometimes willing to punch and say the thing that you're like, did you just say that? and what it ends up being,
but it's sometimes what everyone was already thinking.
Yeah, everyone was thinking. They just decided to say it, and it is refreshing in our leadership team and in our in our company when folks say that. At first, it's still shocking, and you're like, you know what? There's a point there. We got to think about this. So it's funny.
Absolutely. I see in our portfolio companies, a lot of employees, you know, coming to us, basically telling us how some things are going to be done. Whereas like my generation, we never would have had the wherewithal to push back on our employees or our employers and ask for things and demand things in such a way. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying it's different, right? We have to understand that they're going to be somewhat more open to pushing back on the status quo, as you said, and that's good in a lot of ways. So we are here to learn and embrace that, right? And Joe, one more quick question for you. With the asynchronous nature of the projects that you assign interns, how do you manage them? Like, how often are you checking in with them and making sure they're on the right track versus just sending them off to work on a project and then, you know, coming back and being, you know, way off base?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So that was a hot button issue in my previous business where I had a lot to learn as a leader. And I realized over time that needs to really be inbuilt into your core values. So for us, our fourth core value is sharing visible progress. It also means celebrating that progress in a regular cadence. So what I like to say is there's a lot of jobs that feel like field goal kicker jobs, where the expectation is you need to be kicking through the uprights every time you better get it. And the one moment something didn't happen, then everyone's like, what went wrong? I don't know what Joe is doing. And so the best way to deal with that is to always show visible progress, because the human tendency is to assume that nothing is happening when you don't hear anything, right? It's just a normal human thing. I literally, at my house, I joke with my wife, I literally make noises, like I'll drop things or I'll do something because, you know, she'll naturally think like, okay, Joe needs something to do. Like, Joe, like, hey, go walk the dog. And it's like a thing. And I do that too. It's the same thing. So the thought process, if you are showcasing visible progress, so for example, if you have a technology tool, like you're using SharePoint or Confluence or Notion or any of these platforms, they're naturally collaborative. You don't even need to ask for an update. You just can observe. You get a notification. So there's no need to harass anybody. And along the way, what I suggest, I really love EOS as a framework for businesses, the entrepreneurial operating system. I know Allie and I just talked about that. And one of the things EOS speaks to is having a regular cadence of meetings. So set a time. It could be 15 minutes. It could be 30 minutes. Do it every week. That would be my suggestion with an intern, at least once a week, maybe more often if you feel like there's something more active happening. But if you set the time and the date and then just have a quick update, it's great. There's so much strong progress. Everyone's happy. Everyone knows where we're headed.
Great. We've got some great questions coming in, so we'll take a few more. With the technology advancing so quickly, the nature of careers are changing, of course. So what are some of the primary skills that you're looking to instill and foster in your young professionals?
I can jump in on that. I would say that it's been my opinion for a while, and it's catching up, that certifications are the new degree. And with everything moving to cloud, there's professional certifications. There's different levels of certifications, but being a lifelong learner, getting into that as a discipline and staying current on those I look for that. I look for someone that's interested in learning, and I will hire somebody that has the right certifications and the right personality and drive over somebody that has a pedigree that's got a 6-year degree from an Ivy League, because that person's gonna know it, hit the ground running, and they keep current on all that.
Great. Yeah.
I'll just say one thing that we look for in our young professionals is coachability. That's like the number one trait as we're accepting. We don't need you to have a past internship. We really just need to make sure that you are open to feedback and being coached, because that way we can grow together versus you coming in, I've got this great pedigree, to Shaun's point, and I'm here to make a difference. But if you're open and accepting of that feedback, then it'd be a great thing.
Yeah, so I think those are along the same line. So, that curious nature, that desire to learn, and the openness to being coaching are all along the same line there. And finally, do y'all have any advice to getting leadership on board with some of these changes that are going to be necessary and really important to the Gen Z talent pool? How can we convince? Because some of them are old school and don't see some of this as, well, we've never offered this before, why should we offer it now? So how would you compel that leader to adopt some of these changes?
We are in a competitive environment for hiring. Oh my God, if you cannot sell that role and you can't speak to the audience, good luck. You're never going to hire anybody. That's my advice. That's the best. If you're struggling with recruiting, pay attention to this question, because you're probably not speaking to what that audience is looking for.
Great input. And Lola, I'd turn to you again, if you would, please. I'd love your take on this.
Yeah, well, I was going to say the exact same thing as Joe. If you want to have successful hiring and retention, you're going to have to start to think about this, I think. So, I don't think I know. We know that it's a really competitive market out there. And so you're going to have to try to position yourself strategically. And what better time to start thinking about this than now? So I think, if you're not going to start thinking about it, you're going to have a challenging road ahead in terms of hiring and retention.
Agree. Yeah. I think we've seen the evolution from, perks being offered, like all this, fun stuff at the office, ping pong tables and food courts and all that sort of thing. And now it's definitely shifted past that. So, the world has to keep up with what today's professionals are wanting. And a lot of that is along the lines of work-life balance, value-driven business, and so on and so forth. So it's incumbent upon us as the more senior generation to change and accommodate and keep up in order to be competitive in today's environment. So with that, I will just thank all of y'all so much for participating. And I know if you have any follow-up questions, you can get in touch with any of us, probably via Ampersand would be the easiest way. And if you're looking for young professional talent, I have to put in a plug for Ampersand. They do take a lot of the headaches out of internships from a leadership standpoint. They train and develop those interns on the back end, so that you as a manager don't have to do some of those things that traditionally we viewed as headaches. So check out Ampersand if you haven't already. And thank you all for your contributions. I can't wait to get to know all of you more. I learned so much from each and every one of you. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of our panel. And thanks to those of you who tuned in today. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Carrie, and everyone for participating. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks, y'all.